going to be a little bit more regarding the recipe builder and how I come up with points for recipes where I do not have any nutritional information or points values. So I'm actually going to walk through the recipe builder and how I use it in particular when I plug in a new recipe. So as you can see, I have the food dashboard open here, and I am going to go to my foods and to recipes, create a recipe. Now the recipe I'm going to plug in here is the one that I'm actually making for dinner tonight, which is Monday the 21st, but you won't see this until after you've seen the actual presentation of the dinner. But it is the beef stew with beer and paprika from the Pioneer Woman. I love the Pioneer Woman recipes. My husband loves them. I've never had a bad recipe from her. I have had some things I don't like, but I've never had anything that truly was bad. Some of her things are indeed high in points, and I make the adjustments to the serving sizes in order to be able to enjoy her recipes on Weight Watchers. So the recipe originally came through to me from her Food from My Frontier cookbook, one of, I think number 2 of 4, 5 books. Anyway, but I'm going to link the recipe, which is here on her website down below, so if you want to see what it is. So beef stew with beer and paprika. I'm a copy paster, so I'm actually going to plug this in here. I code my recipes based on where they come from, CL for Cooking Light, PW for Pioneer Woman. Now she says that this particular recipe serves 6. I'm going to go ahead and put 6 in, but I can tell you right now that usually I cut those in half. It just all depends on what I'm going to be doing and how the recipe plays out. I do have to say that when it comes to the recipe builder, I'm not really great about putting in some of this information. So it's not 10 hours of prep time, but according to her, it's 10 hours of prep time, 10 minutes of prep time, and 150 minutes of cook time, which is 60, and 60 is 120, so 2 hours and something like that. She says it's easy over here, so I'm going to plug that in too. Ideally, again, for me, I'm not trying to actually record the recipe. I'm just trying to get the point. So sometimes I skip over some of the things that the recipe builder does not require. I'm not going to put a description in here. I am going to jump straight into add ingredient. Now I'm going to add the ingredients exactly as they appear here. I'm going to start with the olive oil, and I'm going to plug it in exactly as she has it, 3 tablespoons. I will tell you now that sometimes, depending upon the recipe, if I think I can get away with less of something and use cooking spray, for example, instead of olive oil, I will definitely do that. But again, for the purpose of this, I'm going to plug in the ingredients exactly as she has them here on the recipe and into the builder. Stew meat. This is where it sometimes gets a little bit funky with the recipe builder. I should probably put something like beef stew or beef, I don't even know what kind of meat is stew meat. It just says stew. Let's think about this. This is a good challenge to run across. Cooked stew. I'm going to go ahead and think about this from the standpoint of beef round, because sometimes it's either some kind of round or it is maybe even a chuck that's been cut out, but it's hard to say. So I'm going to overestimate on this. I'm going to go with the bottom round and just think about it. Now, she calls for 2 pounds here in this recipe. 2 times 16 is 32 ounces. I suppose you could do, yeah, you can do 2 pounds. Guess it depends on what kind of meat you pick. Okay, 2 pounds. Onion. Now, this is where I tend to, whoops, I don't want the cooked onion. I want the raw onion. This is where I tend to get a little bit lazy when it comes to the recipe builder, because I know that onions and garlic aren't going to cost me anything on the recipe, so I tend to be a little bit less stringent when it comes to the 0-point veggies. If you're new to Weight Watchers or you're new to the recipe builder, I would absolutely plug everything in if you're not sure, because it's always going to tell you if it's 0, for example, here. Beer. Let's go with a regular beer, not a light beer, mostly because in my refrigerator tonight I have a Corona, so that's what's going to go in there. Beef stock. So I'm just going through and I'm putting in the ingredients exactly as she has them listed. I wish the recipe builder was a little bit faster. I tend to buy Swanson's. Oh, hello, recipe builder. 4 cups, not 1, Lisa. Water, I'm not going to add that. That's just, and part of that is obviously water is 0, but in her recipe I know that you add more, take away more, depending upon how soupy the stew is and how soupy you like it. So I'm just going to leave the water out. Worcestershire, tomato paste. Now, tomato paste and canned tomatoes and tomato sauce are those kinds of things that you can find that's going to have varying points in it. So if you know your brand, I would definitely encourage you to use your brand. If you don't know your brand, then just use the generic 2 tablespoons. I know that there are 4 tablespoons in a cup. I believe there are 3 tablespoons in a quarter cup, but I am probably wrong. The rest of the ingredients here, after tomato paste, paprika, salt, and pepper, I'm also going to skip those. Again, if you want to add it because you're keeping track of the recipe, then you know, that's a good thing to keep up with. I'm going to skip down to the sugar while I wait for the for Google to respond to me about how many tablespoons of tomato paste. So sugar, white granulated, she calls for 1.5 teaspoons. Add another ingredient. Carrots. No, baby, no cooked. Oh my goodness, that was my phone. Carrots sliced raw. You know, all I want is like a carrot. A carrot. Okay, she calls for 4 whole carrots. Let's just, if each one is half a cup, 2 cups, let's just leave it at that and be done with it. It's not going to cost me anything anyway. New potatoes. I want them uncooked. Do I have the option to pick the number of? She calls for 4 whole new potatoes. I don't know that the ones I bought are small. I'm going to call it 6 just to, you know, just to keep it real. Google, you're failing me. I do not like you today. Let's leave the tomato paste. She, like I said, she has 2 tablespoons. I'm going to leave it at a quarter cup till Google decides to work with me. So I have my entire recipe plugged in here. I know from experience that the recipe builder likes for you to put in some instructions, so I've definitely added that here. And Google finally gave me my tablespoons in a cup, so 4 tablespoons in a quarter cup. Her recipe calls for 2 tablespoons, so I'm going to edit this and actually show that it is 1/8 of a cup. It's not going to save me anything, but you never know. So here's my recipe, 14 points per serving if I do 6 servings. I am going to do what I normally do. Measure my pan empty, add in all the ingredients, cook it, complete it, measure, I should say, weigh my pan again with the ingredients. So if my pan weighs 2 pounds, and then after I have everything in it, it weighs 6 pounds, I know that my ingredients alone weigh 4 pounds. And 4 pounds times 16 ounces is just 64 divided by 6 servings. That's how many ounces each serving is going to be. I will make the decision based on the size of the servings as to whether or not I'm going to spend 14 points on dinner, or I'm going to half that and spend 7 points on dinner, or in some cases I may even half the half and go for a quarter serving and supplement my meal with a salad or a side of veggies. There are a couple of things that are important to me. One is that I won't sacrifice great food just because I am watching what I eat. I will still eat it, I just won't eat as much of it. Also, dinner for my husband and I it's very important. It's the only meal that we get during the week together, and he likes good food, I like good food, we like to bond over that. So I'm going to eat what he's going to eat. I'm not going to make two different things. I'm just not going to necessarily eat as much as he may eat. And there are times when I have a side vegetable or a side salad and he does not, and that's okay. So she says, she being Pioneer Woman, that this feeds 6. I know from experience that that means it's going to be an enormous serving. There's no way I'm probably going to eat a sixth of this, but I'm going to look at it when it's all said and done. So I have my recipe here. I can go in. Oh, I need to save it because I updated it. So I can go in and I can track this for dinner. I'm actually going to track a half of a serving just to go ahead and keep track of those points. Whoops, I had already inserted it once before I fixed my tomato paste. So I have a 7-point dinner logged. I will show you guys what it looks like here at the end of this video so you can see a little bit about how I measure my pan, I will weigh my pan, how I then weigh once the ingredients are in it, and how I'm going to determine what my serving size is going to be, and whether or not I'm going to eat, 14 points or 7 points or 3 points, whatever it may be. So that's a little bit about how I take a recipe that has no nutrition information and no points values, and I plug it into the recipe builder to determine determine how many points it has. I want you to understand that the recipe builder lets you be flexible on 2 dimensions. One is you can adjust things any way you want. I don't necessarily want to use 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to narrow it down to 2. I know for a fact I have 1 3/4 pound steak, bottom round, versus 2 pounds. I can tweak this however I wish. I can also change the number of servings. If you go back down in here to edit the recipe, I can change this. Maybe I'm going to make it be 8. Save it. Comes out to 11 points a serving. I don't sacrifice what I'm going to eat. I just adjust what I'm going to do with the food that I am given to eat or that I have made to eat. The other thing I will do is I will not sacrifice what I need to do for Weight Watchers in order to succeed just because I'm presented with a challenge like this. So the recipe builder lets me go in and change the ingredients. It lets me go in and change the servings. Sometimes if I have some recipes present you with no serving size, I will actually plug in a recipe and plug it in as 1 serving and save it. And I'll show you, this one's going to look like craziness. 86 points. Well, obviously nobody's going to eat a whole potload of anything, but now I know, well, if the whole thing is 86 points, maybe I do want to make my serving size 6 or serving 6 or servings 8, just in order to get my points into kind of a value. And again, when I measure or weigh my pan and then weigh my ingredients and figure out what my serving size is, I can make some adjustments to this. What I will sometimes do is log the full dinner or whatever the meal is at the highest point value that I think I'm going to eat. And then once I've looked at the particular recipe when I've made it, I will say, oh no, I'm going to eat 3/4 of that or 1/4 of that. So that's a little bit about how I use the recipe builder, how I plug that in. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. Please leave those down below. And again, here comes the recipe and how I weigh it out. That the recipe builder is going to ask me to put in some kind of basic information, so I'm just going to copy and paste the instructions into the recipe builder. Now, here is where the recipe builder is really nifty. I have plugged in 6 servings and all of my ingredients, and right now it is telling me that 1/6 of this enormous stew would be 16 points. This is where I'm going to start thinking about ways that I can improve on this recipe. Now, in a perfect world, maybe I should have bought a light beer, but I had beer on hand already, so I'm just going to go with the regular. The only things that I can really cut back on are the beef, the butter, the olive oil, and the potatoes. Everything else is just not worth toying with. So in her recipe, I'm going to look at, she wants me to heat the butter and the oil together in order to brown the beef before I start. Do I need 3 tablespoons of olive oil? I don't think so. I usually do my beef in 2 batches, so I'm going to do 1/2 tablespoon of butter and 1 tablespoon of olive oil for each batch. And then that'll cut that down. I also know that the beef that I did buy is more like about 1.75 pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and update it to just show exactly what mine is. Potatoes, yeah, I'm not going to mess with that. That's the way it is. Did it change it much? 15. So this is where I'm okay with this. I am not going to eat a 15 point dinner. I'm going to tell you right now that when I prep a recipe like this and I see 15 points for a single serving, there's no way. So I'm going to do one of 2 things. Actually, I'm going to do one of 3 things. I'm either going to dig into my points, which I'm not going to do tonight, and eat a full serving and just count it as 15 points. I'm going to adjust my serving size so that I have 1/2 of a serving, for example, in which case I would probably be, 7, 8 points. I'll show you that here when I log it in a minute. Or I'm going to cut my serving size way down and supplement my dinner with something else, maybe a side salad or maybe a side of steamed veggies or something like that. Just because a recipe says that it serves 6 does not mean you have to eat 1/6 of this. This is going to be a recipe too where I am going to weigh my pan before any ingredients come in. I'm going to add everything together, cook it, and I'm going to weigh it again with the ingredients in it. So for example, if my pan weighs 2 pounds and all of my ingredients with my pan makes it weigh 6 pounds, then I know that my entire stew weighs 4 pounds. Then I can easily gauge what is 1/6 of 4 pounds. Off the top of my head, I have no clue. But I can easily do the math offline and decide, is that 1/6 of a pan or casserole or stew or dish or whatever I'm making, is it enormous for 15 points? Is it tiny for 15 points? Because that's also going to drive my decision as far as, am I going to eat a whole serving, a 1/2 serving, a 1/4 serving? Am I going to supplement it? Am I going to be happy with just eating what it is? I love dinner. My husband and I eat dinner together every single night. I typically cook. It is an important meal for us. So this is where I make sacrifices. I tend to eat less during the day and eat more during the evening. So my entire recipe is here. I'm going to say create this recipe. I can always tweak it later. So here we go again. If I wanted to go in and scroll down to the recipe and click edit and decide, you know what, I want this to serve 8 people. I'm going to save it. Now it's going to track out at 11 if I do 8 servings. I can tell you right now, her serving sizes are enormous. I'm going to go back in and move it to 6, but I always know there's just no way that I would eat 1/6 of almost any of her recipe, but I am going to leave it there. So I'm going to go ahead and track it for dinner, but I'm going to track it as a 1/2 serving. Going to pop up as 8 points. When I am cooking this, and I do my math, I will definitely show you guys at the end of this video what that looks like as far as the pan versus the ingredients and that kind of thing. But this gives me an idea of how many points I'm going to spend on dinner. I'm going to give it an eyeball when I make it to determine, excuse me, whether or not I'm going to supplement it with anything to determine, you know, do I want to throw in a salad or save a little space maybe for some fruit or something and applesauce after dinner, that kind of thing. But I'm happy with the way this rolls out right now. So that's a little bit about how I take a recipe that has no points and no nutrition information, and I plug it into the recipe builder and then do kind of what I call a sliding scale in my head to determine how big my serving is going to be and how I'm going to calculate that. So coming up here, you will see the recipe. Here is my portion from last night that I've measured out. Using my scale, I've come up with a 6.8 ounce serving. So now I'm going to show you how I calculated how big my serving was going to be. I weighed my empty pan before I started making this dish. And you can see here, the weight of my empty pan is 3.10 pounds. The weight of the pan after the dish was complete with the food in it was 8.63 pounds. Now, I'm an Excel user. Obviously, some of you guys are going to use calculators, and that's fine. So I'll try to walk through the math thought in my head versus just typing through Excel. But what I want to do is basically find out the weight of the food. So I'm going to subtract out the weight of the pan from the weight of the total pan with the food in it. It comes out to 5.53 pounds. That's just the weight of the food that was in the pan at the end of the cooking process. Because I work better in things like ounces or grams when it comes to serving sizes, I'm going to convert this weight to ounces. Now there are 16 ounces in a pound, so I'm going to multiply 5.53 times 16. This is my total ounces of the food that was in the pan. So now it's really easy for me to take the total and divide it by however many servings I have in my recipe. In the case of this particular recipe, oops, looking at my backup report, Pioneer Woman says that this is a 6-serving recipe. So I'm going to divide this by 6, and I know that a single serving is 14.75 ounces. So I've already plugged this in. This is my recipe in the recipe builder. I've already calculated it at 6 servings. I know that each serving is 14 points. So in order for me to get a 14-point serving, I'm going to measure out 14.75 ounces of this particular dish. I can also do math to determine how many ounces are in a half serving. So to springboard off of what I said earlier about the recipe builder itself, I can do things with the recipe from an edit standpoint and make this as many servings as I want. So let's say I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to make this 8 servings. The recipe builder is going to tell me that at 8 servings, it's 11 points a serving. So now I'm going to change this so that instead of 6 servings, it's 8. Well, now I know that a single serving at 11 points is 11.06 ounces. And a half serving of that is 5.53 ounces. If I go back in here, edit, and change this to 1 serving, which I did earlier, it's going to tell me that this dish as a whole is 86 points. So I know that roughly this recipe is 1 point for an ounce, something along those lines. That's really rough math, but I know that this is my total dish here. 88.48 ounces is 86 smart points. So once you know some of the information about how much the food is in total weighs and how many points the dish is, you can play around with how big of a serving size do you want to eat. Now, springboarding, I'm going to go ahead and change this while I'm thinking about it. So pardon me, I don't want to lose this. Springboarding off of that, though, I'm going to show you my dinner from last night and get a little geeky here on the math. I had a serving last night that weighed 6.8 ounces. Admittedly, when I did my math last night, I did it in my head and I kind of scrounged around for sort of a general number of my serving. Let me go back up here and change this to 6 so that it reflects the accurate serving. I came up with something roughly like 7 ounces when I did the math in my head last night. So in the end, when I measured out my serving, I measured out 6.8 ounces, and you can see that on the video of showing the dish itself when I got my serving out. I'm going to be super geeky here and show you as a percentage of the total amount that was in the pan. Remember, my total ounces of food in the pan, 88.48 ounces. This is 7.69% of the total dish. This is where I get really geeky. I don't do this hardly ever, but I thought it would be fun to show. If I know that all of the points in the dish are 86, and I had 7.69% of that, then if I do the math, I come up with a 6.61 points for dinner. That is really, really crazy geeky and not worth the math, but for those of you who are interested in being able to use math to play through how to make the recipe builder work for you and change up, what if I do like a 3/4 portion, or what if I do 10 ounces instead of 12 ounces? You can really play with the math and determine how are you going to make this dish fit into your plan. And that is what I am all about, and why I love the recipe builder and the ability to measure and using a good food scale to determine how many ounces or pounds or grams, whichever you want to use, is in this pan, and how many am I going to eat. You can see here I plugged in a half serving and got 7 points for it. It's 6.61. That's close enough for me. That's the end of that. So that's a little bit about how I use the recipe builder to determine how many points are in a dish when I do not know nutrition or point information. There's a lot of flexibility, and you should really play with the recipe builder to determine how that flexibility is going to work for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos. And if there's anything specific you want to see, let me know. I will talk to you guys later.